You're a church pastor and bishop who may have fathered a child with a woman who's 28 years younger than you. 3 different men during the time you conceived your daughter. The second possible father you've identified, Mr. Myles-Jones, is 9 years older than you.
As a pastor, I'm a bishop, but I'm also a traveling pastor. But I'm also a man. I want to stress that right away. That I'm a man and I have manly needs. So it doesn't mean that I won't see a woman, but I'm also a pastor. We enjoy each other. I like their company. We share some tragedies together. And it just kind of brought a connection. There was a connection. I thought she was hot. And we exchanged numbers. And after exchanging numbers, I decided that I wanted to follow up on this. So we set a date for the following week, and we went out and, we just had a great time together. We could probably, make a relationship and go a little bit further as time went along.
It was supposed to have been like a Bible study thing, but instead of that, it was like more, it led on to sexual.
This continuation delivers the next 1,500 words. Clean narrative description only. No scenes. No dialogue formatting. No headings. Just courtroom action explained in plain descriptive style. Judge Lauren Lake remains central, and all required keywords are integrated naturally. DNA test people regret taking truth changes, everything podcast evidence stage in divorce case. The game-changing attorney podcast relationship between law and justice celebrate recovery testimonies. The Divorce Course podcast adverse inference in Evidence Act DNA test, cheating stories, concept of justice, in jurisprudence adoption stories, full episodes Supreme Court child support. Once the first results are announced, the courtroom energy shifts from heated argument to stunned silence. Judge Lauren Lake allows a brief pause before continuing, giving each participant room to absorb the scientific clarity delivered by the DNA test. In her courtroom, truth does not simply correct misunderstandings. It forces personal rewrites. This is the precise psychological moment that legal commentators often highlight in the game-changing attorney podcast. The transformative rupture between what people believed and what evidence confirms. The second man, having devoted emotional labor, late-night feedings, and social identity to a child he presumed to be his, does not react with anger when hearing he is not biologically connected. Instead, he responds with consistency, the same way many subjects in Celebrate Recovery testimonies claim redemption not through vindication, but through responsibility. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges that this expression of continued support exemplifies the higher dimension of parenthood that courts cannot legislate. The emotional fatherhood beyond genetic assignment. The bishop, now relieved of alleged biological responsibility, expresses spiritual closure. Yet Judge Lauren Lake warns him and the courtroom that emotional detachment does not undo participation in conception circumstances. Here, she underscores a principle referenced in concept of justice in jurisprudence. Law does not punish past intimacy, but regulates future obligation. His role is over legally, but ethically. The disclosure continues to ripple through his pastoral standing, reminding him and viewers that people regret taking certain risks not because the moment felt wrong, but because consequences arrived late and legally structured. The young mother sits in visible remorse. She now has to accept that both men she brought forward are not the father, and that the court's involvement must eventually continue with the actual biological candidate. This is the hardest point of the evidence stage in divorce case style of accountability. Testimony is not decoration. It is architecture. Now her credibility, self-judgment, and maternal responsibility must realign, especially because the unnamed third father must be contacted and tested. Judge Lauren Lake does not shame her. Instead, she acknowledges how sexual autonomy becomes a legal document when a child enters the world. Just as the Divorce Course podcast often explains, paternity disputes turn private intimacy into public record. Physical attraction, emotional need, loneliness, and grief, all valid personal motivations, transform into legal exhibits once a child requires Supreme Court child support eligibility. The second man, although not biologically linked, remains calm. His quiet steadiness is a contrast to many anxious fathers within cheating stories segments, who often collapse under betrayal, shame, or financial fear. Instead, he presents the rare example of adult emotional continuity described in adoption stories' full episodes, where love or duty does not erase itself merely because DNA disagrees. Judge Lauren Lake praises this, making it clear that although the law has spoken, the heart is not bound to withdraw. Attention returns briefly to the bishop. As a religious figure, his initial instinct is to claim that emotional involvement is secondary to divine purpose and pastoral duty. But Judge Lauren Lake is precise. Spiritual roles do not exempt legal clarity. What is especially significant here, and what legal scholars reference in relationship between law and justice debates, is that moral title, religious title, or personal grief do not neutralize parental possibility. Only laboratory DNA results do, and now they have. The mother admits she feared facing the truth because she feared losing the emotional support of both men. This confession reflects a psychological pattern described in recovery frameworks and celebrate recovery testimonies. Avoiding truth to avoid abandonment. But, as Judge Lauren Lake often reiterates, avoiding truth does not prevent loss. It multiplies it. Now she must locate the actual father, disclose the court's results, and potentially undergo more testing. She is not being punished, but she is expected to reconstruct her child's legal identity. What makes this case unusually weighted is that neither man, despite their differences, attacked her character in a destructive way after the results. They instead embody the moral nuance that truth changes everything podcast explores. Truth does not break everyone involved. Sometimes it frees them from false obligation while preserving dignity. The second man, still emotionally invested, repeatedly confirms his choice to remain in the child's life. Judge Lauren Lake explains that while legal paternity has been dismissed, emotional paternity is voluntary and respected. This is a profound moment of lived jurisprudence, aligning precisely with the concept of justice in jurisprudence framework. Law gives biological determination, but justice allows human continuity. The bishop, now legally removed from fatherhood claims, reflects silently on how reputation becomes vulnerable under judicial transparency. Judge Lauren Lake reminds him gently yet firmly that both participants created conditions for confusion. A DNA test does not judge, it clarifies. His pastoral justification no longer serves relevance because the law has spoken. His relief is permitted, but it is not celebrated. The mother, facing forward, expresses regret not as defense but as acknowledgement. This is the critical distinction legal ethicists highlight. Regret as performance versus regret as restructure. She expresses embarrassment, fear of social commentary, and the dread of contacting yet another man for testing. Judge Lauren Lake reminds her, and the viewing world, that motherhood requires difficult confrontations, and avoidance does not diminish responsibility but delays it. This entire emotional wave mirrors how people regret taking certain emotional shortcuts discussed often in infidelity case studies. Yet, in this courtroom, regret is not weaponized. It is guided. Judge Lauren Lake structures it, clarifies it, and situates it within relevant legal obligations. The court session closes without dramatic breakdowns, because the breakdown already occurred in the private timeline before the hearing. The aftermath is procedural. Contacting the third possible father, ordering another DNA test, certifying final paternity, and preparing legal papers for child support compliance. Judge Lauren Lake ensures that no participant leaves misinformed. She clarifies that while these two men are now legally excluded, one remains emotionally available, and the mother must now address paternity with the actual father. This is not resolution, it is transition. And this is what legal scholars identify in adverse inference in Evidence Act analyses. The truth fills the courtroom first. Reconstruction follows outside it. Legal closure does not equal emotional closure, and emotional loyalty does not equal biological claim. In this second segment, the courtroom embodies not accusation but recalibration. Judge Lauren Lake has not merely determined paternity. She has coached reconstruction. Truth has not humiliated but reorganized. And in that reorganization, justice, legal and emotional, has begun to align, proving that DNA is not just a laboratory tool, but jurisprudence embodied. After both men are declared not to be the biological father, the courtroom atmosphere shifts from debate into correction. Judge Lauren Lake does not allow the moment to become humiliation. She guides it into accountability, which is a core function of her judicial style. Now, everyone present must confront what the DNA test has revealed: that the truth was never aligned with anyone's assumptions, emotions, claims, or hopes. It belongs only to the science that confirmed it. The mother sits with visible weight. She now understands that this process is not simply about nomming a father, but legally grounding a child in identity, support, and rights. As legal analysts often discuss on the Game Changing Attorney podcast, the end of a paternity hearing is never the end. It is the beginning of lawful reconstruction. Judge Lauren Lake makes it clear that the law will not shame her for past intimacy. The law simply needs accuracy, because a child requires legal anchoring, not emotional improvisation. The bishop, though relieved, is forced to acknowledge that spiritual identity does not grant immunity from legal clarity. This confrontation between spiritual narrative and empirical proof reflects the relationship between law and justice that legal philosophers dissect. Moral titles and religious positions do not determine fatherhood. Genetics do. His exit from responsibility is not triumph but clarification. Judge Lauren Lake does not let the moment suggest victory. She reminds him that his participation in the narrative affected the child's identity journey, even if not biologically. The second man, who emotionally supported the child, now absorbs the legal dismissal with maturity. This is where the quiet nobility of responsibility emerges, similar to the redemptive honesty found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies. Judge Lauren Lake carefully distinguishes between legal fatherhood, which the DNA test has denied, and emotional fatherhood, which this man has voluntarily upheld. She does not encourage him to adopt responsibility he is not legally bound to, but she honors him as a man who showed up when no biological certainty existed. His love, though not genetically required, becomes the courtroom's moral axis. The mother must now face the third man who has not yet appeared. She must reopen the emotional wound and begin a new stage of legal procedure. This is the painful administrative truth often analyzed in the Divorce Course podcast. A parent's private mistakes become state record obligations. The court will require continued follow-up, further testing, and a new issuance of legal notice. This is not punishment but correction, a recalibration toward truth rather than a judgment of the path taken to reach it. The bishop remains seated a moment longer than necessary, absorbing the secondary effect of the test. His pastoral image will likely carry public judgment outside the courtroom, a reality that surfaces in cheating stories, broadcasts, and public commentary. Yet Judge Lauren Lake refrains from moral pronouncement. She stays within her judicial lane. The truth has been named. Lives must adjust. This strict adherence to legal framework is what inspires academic debates within the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice here is not moral cleansing but structural reorientation. The second man expresses again that his emotional connection will not vanish. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges him with professional respect, while reinforcing that the law cannot name him father and cannot demand child support from him under Supreme Court child support guidelines. Emotional loyalty, while valued, cannot be converted into obligation just because it is sincere. This distinction clarifies why the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act never presumes paternity from presence, affection, or financial help. Inference cannot override verified truth. The mother, now more composed than earlier, admits she feared exactly this. The unraveling of the story she hoped would remain partially uncertain. But uncertainty, Judge Lauren Lake reminds her, is not an option when a child's life structure is at stake. As people regret taking decisions that blend grief, sexuality, fear, and need, they must still face the legal documentation that follows. Parenthood under law is not defined by memory or emotion, but by proof. This moment, heavy yet clarifying, mirrors countless narratives discussed in adoption stories, full episodes, where biological identity, emotional devotion, and legal procedure must align before a child's life can be properly supported. The mother does not collapse under shame. She recalibrates under truth. Judge Lauren Lake praises her for facing this publicly rather than hiding privately, because children deserve certainty more than adults deserve comfort. The bishop exits internally changed, no matter his outward calm. His pastoral authority must coexist with a public record of genetic exclusion. This is not disgrace but factual conclusion. His grief-based emotional boundary, expressed earlier, now has validation. He is free to detach without guilt. Yet Judge Lauren Lake subtly reminds him that leadership requires accountability even in non-paternal outcomes. The second man remains the emotional center, even though legal biology removed him. His continued support echoes the principle that truth changes everything, but does not erase chosen compassion. In family law teaching environments, this case will likely be analyzed as a parallel to guardianship without obligation, a lesson in voluntary stability rather than state-enforced duty. The mother, now preparing for the next legal step, becomes the case's focal point of reconstruction. She must notify the actual father, submit new documents, cooperate with the next DNA test, and fully realign her support petition. This phase is neither dramatic nor televised. It is administrative, incremental, and required, a reality highlighted in the procedural realism of evidence stage in divorce case training sessions. Judge Lauren Lake closes the matter with dignity. She neither romanticizes the second man's loyalty nor condemns the mother's confusion. Instead, she performs the purest application of the relationship between law and justice. Truth must anchor identity, not opinion, not assumption, not affection. The courtroom disperses not with victory but with instruction. The final echo of this case is not the disclosure that two men are not fathers, but the living proof that the legal system does not chase blame. it secures clarity. That clarity now belongs to the child, who will eventually grow under a truth obtained publicly, but applied privately. This is why the Game-Changing Attorney podcast often concludes that courtroom truth is not the end of a story, but the rewriting of its foundation. By the time Judge Lauren Lake stands, the courtroom is not louder but quieter. The noise has been replaced by understanding. The mother knows what to do next. The bishop knows what he no longer carries. The second man knows what he chooses to carry anyway. And the court has fulfilled its only mandate: align parenthood with fact, align responsibility with biology, and leave emotion free to define itself outside legal obligation. The proceedings end not with applause but with alignment. Truth has been named. Identity must now follow. And if there is one lesson preserved from this case, mirrored across legal analysis, family psychology, and every recorded moment of this courtroom, it is that truth changes everything, but it also frees everything it touches from confusion.